10 cars on the entry, technically speaking, and 10 therefore should go into Super Pole for the second part of the session. There's a recap then of the season. It was point scoring at the Road to Le Mans event on the 18th of June, and therefore coming here to the third round of the season, TF Sports have the championship lead from the Triple F racing team by ACM squad as well. It's Johnny Palmer in the commentary booth, delighted to say joined by the DailySportsCar.com's editor Graham Goodwin, and yeah, tricky tyre choice this, Graham, for half an hour of qualifying ahead of a 2-hour race later on today.
It is, and it's a track that's known to be pretty punishing on the rubber here as well, Johnny. Clouds above us, pretty threatening at the moment, I'd say. We've had some glorious sunshine here over the last couple of days of testing and practice, but wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of rain later in the day. Don't think we're going to get that during this session, though, but what we are going to see is a really very nice selection of GT3 cars.
Let's remind you where we are then. A resurfaced Red Bull ring, resurfaced in the spring. The first time in about 20 years that was done, but this place has existed since 1969, and formerly, of course, the Österreich ring from 1969, but it's a 2.6 mile circuit at the moment, 9 turns, and principally right-handers, but there are 2 left-handers right in the middle of the lap, and they are very, very quick, so you need to be wary of the tyres on the right-hand side of the car together with the ones on the left.
Very physical circuit indeed for the drivers, and particularly in these GT cars. They do move about a bit despite the pretty high levels of downforce nowadays in these modern GT3 cars. You've got an excellent example of that there with the, well, menacing looking McLaren 650S GT3, the Triple F racing car, the number 55 car. That car sits second in the point standings after the first 2 rounds, 2 point scoring rounds of the season, just 1 point away from TF Sports. And that means, Johnny, pole position here would see a tie in the points moving through to the race.
I was massively impressed with Hiroshi Hamaguchi's professionalism, but also his pace, particularly at the Le Mans 24 Hours the weekend, and they had an hour-long race, or just short of an hour, on the Saturday morning. But Hamaguchi, during his stint, really did impress. And as you say, Adrian Quaife-Hobbs, his co-driver, and Hiroshi trail Ewan Hankey and Sally Yolok by just a point. 37 plays 36, and then a larger gap of 11 points back to Alexei Basov and Victor Scheitar. But we shouldn't overlook those 2 drivers, winners of the Le Mans weekend race, and Basov has shown tremendous pace as the bronze driver so far.
And of course, Basov and Scheitar come to this series having been champions in the World Endurance Series in the GTM class a couple of years back. And as I say, it's one of the great part of this. We may not have the strength of numbers yet, but the variety is certainly there. Ivor Dunbar there aboard the number 25 FF Corsa car. This is one of 3 brand new Ferrari 488 GT3s, the new turbo V8 engine car. Really very quick indeed. Ivor learning his trade in this GT3 battle. Will not be one of the front runners, but is trying very hard and improving lap by lap. And there, Johnny, as a car we didn't see enough of at the Imola round, the number 88 Mentos Racing Porsche 911 GT3R.
A wave there from Egidio Perfetti, who's a great character if you get to chat to him. He is the brother of former British GT champion Daniele Perfetti, and Daniele won that championship with Michael Caine in 2012, but it's a racing family, and Norwegian Egidio Perfetti is the bronze driver, joined though by homeboy Klaus Bechler this weekend. Bechler didn't get a chance to drive the Porsche at Imola, so hopefully he will get a stint at his home track this weekend.
It's a reliveried classic of modern racing. Ferrari 458 will be Nicolas Misler. Take that car out, joined by Mathieu Vazevier, another ex-WEC driver, Mathieu. But Nicolas with a car that appeared at Imola. It was a very late entry there, with a bit of a hodgepodge delivery, but looks very smart indeed for the weekend here at the Red Bull Ring.
Some good crowds starting to assemble in the grandstands. This race meeting is actually free for spectators if you want to sit on the banking or indeed in the grandstands. It's €10 to get into the paddock, but because of the GT3 Le Mans Cup and the ELMS now being part of the Renault Sport Series, or indeed the Renault Sport Series brought on board as 2 support categories, the free nature of those Renault weekends, formerly the World Series by Renault, is retained, and therefore it was free to get into the grandstands at Imola, likewise here at Red Bull, and indeed for the rest of the season season at Paul Ricard, Spa-Francorchamps and Estoril in Portugal to end the season. So the first 15 minutes have commenced. You can see that from the caption at the top of the screen. It's only the bronze driver that is permitted to qualify, by the way. That really does put the onus on the AM element of the driver combination. A lot of responsibility, therefore, on some relatively inexperienced drivers, but it means they get a whole load of track time. And this was, well, because we only have 10 cars here this weekend, it was due to be 11. But we're -1, then we should see all of these cars head into the second portion of the qualifying session. It's called Super Pole, and that will determine obviously the front end of the grid. And as hopefully the grid expands through the season, where we maybe get 15, 18, 20 cars, then it'll be the top 10 that go into the second portion of the session.
And what you were saying there, Johnny, about the concentration on the bronze driver, that was certainly one of the points that was being brought out by the guys from Imola. That were telling us that was one of the real strengths of the championship. It meant that they were able to balance their own performance, to measure their own performance rather, against their peers, not against a pro driver who is always going to be quicker in this or any other machinery. And that's what we saw in the race at Imola with that fantastic lead battle between Hamaguchi and Sally Yulik, wasn't it, for the race win.
Interestingly, the start drivers have already been named for the race later on today. Most of those drivers will be bronzes, but Johnny Molam will be at the wheel of the number 25 car. That Ferrari driven as we stand by Ivor Dunbar. He has to qualify it, but he doesn't have to start the race, and it'll be Johnny then to take the responsibilities for the first hour or so. But there is the number 5 Triple F Racing team by ACM car. Fusong Yang, who has been named as a driver, is actually team principal as well, not driving this weekend, but keen to have a new guy, another Japanese, on the bill ground.
Well, we've had a little bit of a mix-up, haven't we, with drivers for this? The car rather unfortunately eliminated from the Imola race by an accident in practice for the owner. Marco Melandri, ex-MotoGP driver, was initially mentioned here as driving as the bronze, but Marco not here. Instead, we've got ex-Super GT racer Toyo Aida is aboard the car and will be aboard the car right now, joined by, well, it's joint team principal, isn't it? It's Andrea Caldarelli, another ex-Super GT racer, of course. But these two Triple F cars, very different cars, of course, the McLaren and the Lamborghini Huracan GT3, turned out very smartly indeed in this black and, I guess, orange highlights livery. They do look smart on track. They look even better when you see them live in the paddock or on track.
Yeah, similar paint job for the McLaren that we've caught glimpses of in this session as well, the 650S. So it's tricky for this team because they have two cars, but they behave very differently. But nevertheless, some iconic machinery, I suppose, in GT3 land. And yes, Aida, who is the new man into the team to join Andrea Caldarelli, does have experience of GT3 Lamborghinis. And he's also raced, I think, Ferraris and Porsches as well. And he's doing a bit of Porsche Carrera Cup racing to dovetail that with his Michelin GT3 Le Mans Cup duties. Already nearly had 5 minutes, by the way, of the session. Times are starting to come in. Alexei Basov quickest in this number 72 Ferrari in classic SMP racing colours. There are loads of cars here in those colours, whether they be single-seaters or further afield as well. Some, well, of course, they've got the BR01s in the European Le Mans Series cars that are in SMP livery as well. So it's a livery that extends through all sorts of different categories, and we expect this number 72 Ferrari 488 to be towards the pointy end come the important stage of this qualifying session. Caught a glimpse there of the rather large yellow sausage curbs that are just off the track to enforce the real need to respect the track limits around this circuit. And I know it was a contentious issue during the Formula 1 weekend only a couple of weekends ago here at the Red Bull Ring, but the FIA's defence was, well, don't run off the track and you won't clobber those sausage curbs and damage your car.
Indeed, and as we watch Alexei Basov continue on what was a very quick lap to grab provisional pole, he's got work to do now because Hamaguchi's gone through in the McLaren and has grabbed that advantage into the 131s now for both Hamaguchi and Egidio Perfetti goes second fastest. Phil Hansen goes third in the Tocqueville Audi. So lots of variety again, Johnny, at the lead of this train.
Yep, so Hamaguchi in the McLaren, there he is in the 55 car from Perfetti. We expected the Porsche to be quick. Audi third, the number 19 car. Not seen an awful lot of the Top with Motorsports machine on our screen just yet, but it will get some exposure later on in the session. There on the bottom of the ticker, you can see the gap, 0.439 of a second then from Basov to Hamaguchi, but Hamaguchi could be set to improve. He's done a personal best through sector 1, and Egidio Perfetti going quicker than anyone now through the first sector. So 9 minutes to go. This is solely to set, well, positions 11 to 20 effectively, but we don't have those cars at the moment, so as I say, they will all go into the second portion of this session, and we're expecting these times to be wiped. This is purely a means to get into Superpole and decide the front 5 rows. Mentos Racing, their Porsche, with its simplistic livery, but it looks great. I think it really works well. The Perfettis are running the confectionery business, very well known across the world, and I was hoping maybe we might be able to lay our hands on some Chupa Chups lollipops later on.
Sadly not. It probably helps the quality of the commentary that we've not got them at the moment.
That's
Johnny.
true, yes.
Indeed, Perfetti goes quickest and the first man into the 130s on 30.969 for Egidio Perfetti in that number 88 Mentos Racing Porsche. Passes Thomas Fleur in his Ferrari 488, the AF Corsa entered car. So we wait for Alexei Basov, who I think is going to make a big jump up the order. He comes through to complete his lap now. Just about keeps the number 72 car on the racing surface, and he does into the 129s, 129.9. So it's a full second quicker than the previous best set last time around by Egidio Perfetti, but runs way off at the end of turn 1. I think we're going to start to see a couple of warnings on screen for this.
Yeah, it caught the curb at the wrong angle there at turn number 1. That flipped the car up a little bit higher in the air than he would have wished, and therefore had to run over the sausage curb on the exit of turn 1 as well. So you are pushing the track limits to their absolute limit there out of turn 1, and we'll see whether he is given a warning. There won't be a reprimand as such, because he'll be given a black and white warning flag initially, and then if he persists on running over that white line, then penalties can come into the equation. Good exit out of Remus corner rather, turn number 3, and now they head to this quick double left-hander.
It's not going to matter. This lap will be deleted come what may because of that. So running wide, absolutely correct. And what we spotted, it looks very much as if Eduardo Freitas, the race director, spotted too. So whatever he does, my guess is, yes, he looks like he's lifted out of this. He's got the message. A little bit of wiggling about to keep the heat in the tyres. But this is a very impressive. It goes wide there as well. Did it once, I may as well do it twice. It's not to make any difference here, he thinks.
Well, backed off and then really pushed through turns 8 and 9 to make sure that his speed over the start-finish line was at its optimum. There's the number 25 car, another 488 in the field. Ivor Dunbar currently 7th, but Hiroshi Hamaguchi, who's tumbled down to 5th, having been quickest in this session earlier on, now pits. So the 55 car safely into the top 10, of course. All these cars should be, as long as they make it to the end of the 15 minutes. And don't have a big one in the process. There's the Top with Motorsports Audi that we mentioned, was 3rd fastest. Now where is the number 19 car? 6th position for Hansen. And
getting on towards halfway through this first part of the session.
Philip Hansen
halfway through the first part of this session.
Sharing with Nigel Moore is Philip Hansen. That's a gold and silver combination. Nigel raced at Imola as well, and as we've said, this Audi R8 does add to the variety for the Michelin GT3 Le Mans Cup. Decides not to pit. Fastest lap so far for the Audi is a 129 the 29.929 is the time he's trying to match, and improves, but he's still 1.4 seconds away, but that puts him up to 5th for Philip Hansen.
Attention for the McLaren.
Yeah, so it's unlikely Hamaguchi will now head back into the session with less than 5 minutes to go. Alexei Basov quickest by 0.648 of a second, because Egidio Perfetti has done a 1:30.577. And Sally Yoluk within a second now of Basov's time in the number 34 Aston. And here indeed comes Yoluk. He managed to go a little quicker than he's managed through sector 1. So does that improve the time? No, because he struggled through The last sector took him 30 seconds when Abbasov's managed it in a 27.3, so that was a slower lap for Yoluk there.
But a quicker one for Basov, and further extends the advantage now. It was a 129.826 for Alexei Basov. That's the target in terms of the real pace that's in this track, and it has been through the free practice sessions we've seen so far for the cars. It's the 72 car, it's been the one to beat in terms of the pace that's available, and Alexei Basov as a bronze driver is proving to be quite a weapon for SMP Racing.
By the way, driving the number 14 car, Pierre-Marie Delina, sharing with Adrian Delina, and that's a bronze-silver combination for a 4.58 Ferrari in the Italia GT3 spec. But we're looking at Saleh Yoluk in third fastest so far, behind the Porsche of Mentos Racing, Dutch squad, and the Russian outfit SMP Racing for the 72 car, although, yes, and run by the Russian squad, though we do have 3 AF Corsa Ferraris from Italy. And are they all 488s? No, they're not, because the 71 is a 458. Likewise, the 14 car that we've mentioned. Nose to tail, though. Cars coming into the pit lane here, Graham.
Indeed, it's the Lamborghini. The Triple F car is on pit road now, in the hands of Inesan. And in behind, at the moment, is the car in the pound seats. That's the 72 Ferrari 488. The winner, of course, from the Road to Le Mans race. Was it not?
The 72 car, yes,
did.
It was. Yes, absolutely.
So they started their season a little late, but made up for that in considerable style.
Yeah, good drive that. Giulio Perfetti led the race for a good while, and speaking of the devil, here is the Mentos Racing Porsche. So Perfetti, we know, has good speed wherever he goes, and lies in second position in this initial qualifying session, 0.751 of a second shy of Alexei Basov's time. And the Porsche pits as well, so we still have a couple of minutes to go in the session, but everyone deciding that's the best they can do for the moment. And this pause in proceedings then, as the 15 seconds will continue to elapse, will get down to 0. Then there'll be about a 5-minute interval before we go into the super pole element of this qualifying session. Nicolas Mislan will stay at the wheel of the Classic and Sports Racing, Classic and Modern Racing Ferrari 458 Italia, sharing with Mathieu Vazevière, who has a lot of pace whatever he drives. But Vazevière not permitted to take part in the qualifying session. All bronzes, of course, and Ivor Dunbar does not pit, so the 25 car has a chance of improving on this lap. It's not been spectacular, although the last sector is good for Ivor Dunbar, the best he's managed so far in this session. So 6 laps now done for the number 25 FF Corsa Ferrari, and Ivor is in for another lap.
And, you know, this is a great example of what this series is all about. Ivor Dunbar, not at the sharp end of the grid, Johnny, but improving his trade, getting the race experience, measuring himself against a grid of his peers, which is basically very enthusiastic amateur drivers in very similar machinery, and he can see the scale of the task he's got ahead of him to get onto terms, and that's going to be important as his racing career goes forward.
But shares the car with a tremendous talent, Johnny Molam, and you know he's not only a professional driver to share his Ferrari 458 or 488 rather, but he's also a coach.
Indeed.
So it means that he can really lend his advice, you know, tell him how to go quicker around certain corners. And I know that speaking to Ivor Dunbar at Le Mans, he really is thankful to have Johnny on board to, you know, further his career, further his development, and let's see whether he can improve on this lap. Only 24 seconds to go, though. If he gets round to the checkered flag on this occasion, he might be able to squeeze one more lap out of it.
Indeed, but just as we switch to Ivor Dunbar, Philip Hansen made a further improvement there, so 4th quickest now for the young man in the Audi, the 19 car. Another of the drivers, although slightly different age group to Ivor Dunbar, much younger driver indeed, Philip Hansen, who's leaning heavily on the experience of Nigel Moore, Ginetta champion, of course, and went on to success in other forms of racing. Was he the last Formula Palmer Audi champion? He was certainly champion of that series. Raced in an LMP1 car at the Le Mans 24 Hours for Team LNT back in the day.
So, well, my question's answered there, because Ivor Dunbar didn't squeeze an extra lap out of it. It was 135.2 that I've managed. Wasn't very far away from his best, but a 34.2, his best of the session, puts him 9th and marginally quicker than Pierre-Marie Delina, who finishes 10th, but Alexei Basov, who bailed out of that session pretty early, there he is still strapped into the number 72 Ferrari with an absolute best through sector 1, so he was really bringing the times down. There might be more in it, you know. A 129.8 is the car's best so far.
Watching Philip Hansen still as we look at the action on pit road, and Hansen crosses the line and improves dramatically into the 130s for Philip Hansen and goes 3rd quickest in the Audi. So it's the 72 Ferrari 488 car we look at here on pit road that's quickest in that section of qualifying. Then the Porsche Egidio Perfetti, Philip Hansen's top with Motorsport Audi, Sally Yulik in the Aston Martin, then the Ferrari 458 of Nicolas Mislan, then the number 55 McLaren. So the top 6 in the session, Johnny, all different cars.
That's all right, isn't it? Yeah, so we know about the variety in this category. There are even more body shapes at the Road to Le Mans event, when there were quite a few GT3 cars taking part in that event as a one-off, but the championship cars did all score points. So we come here with 2 rounds under the belt, and as we've said, TF Sport lead the way on 37 from the Triple F Racing team on 36 points, and then the first of the AF Corsa squads, number 57, winners at Le Mans, are on 25 points.
That's
it's tight at the top.
It's 72. It's actually wrong on the scoring sheets. It's number 72 car that won, so 57 should read 72. It's the car we're looking at now that won the race at Le Mans.
You're right. Let me scribble that out and correct it even as we speak.
It's a very good looking livery, proudly showing off, of course, the national colours of Russia and the corporate colours of SMP.
So already a queue forming at the end of the pit lane. These 5 minutes will run down very quickly indeed, but there is the official classification of qualifying part 1, and the SMP Racing Ferrari number 72 did a 129.826. Alexei Basov did the time, and 3/4 of a second faster therefore of Egidio Perfetti's Mentos Racing Porsche 991 spec GT3 car number 88, a 130.577. But remember, that is not necessarily going to be the order for the front row later on today, and it is a race today of 2 hours that will take us through to 7 o'clock, something like 7 o'clock local time. So it's good to have some Saturday night entertainment heading for dinner this evening, and plenty therefore for the mechanics to think about during a busy Saturday, and indeed the drivers. And of course the silver or the gold or the platinum drivers can only watch. They can offer a little bit of advice, possibly on the radio, but it really is responsibility on the bronzes to qualify the car well. And yes, the times have now been reset, so almost as if that session didn't happen, but it's given us a good indication of who might be quick in the second 15 minutes.
It's effectively qualifying practice, wasn't it? It's practice for qualifying, and what it's given the drivers and the teams the opportunity to do is to make sure the setup is absolutely at its optimum. They seem pretty confident of that. There were noted tyre pressures being checked on a number of the cars once they'd pitted from some of those fast laps. And we're soon going to get underway.
Of course, later on in the season, when we do get above 10 entries, then cars from 11th position and lower will have to settle for the times they did in the first 15 minutes. They won't have the opportunity to head into part 2. This is Superpole, as you may know from World Superbikes and MotoGP racing, but also it's kind of like the Formula 1 qualifying format as well, apart from we don't have Q3, but we do have Q1 and Q2. And this will decide the top 10 cars. But this
nicer
is
sounding cars in this championship.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. This is the calm before the storm, really, and it's interesting that, of course, Alexei Basov will have been thoroughly chuffed with his 129 that he did, but that's gone now, and he's got to do it again, and also be wary of those track limits, because he did have one time deleted by the clerk of the course. I suppose from his perspective, he's kind of worked out how far he can push it now, and as long as he keeps it within that envelope from now on, it should be fine.
We go green in 1 second. Away we go. Green light at the end of pit road, Johnny, and this is it. This is 15 minutes of Superpole.
Yeah. So this is where it really matters, and the front row to be decided, along with all the other rows, to be decided in the next 15 minutes. But everyone wants clear air in front of them as we take the rolling start later on this evening. It's tight into turn 1 on that opening lap, and always better to be on the I reckon probably outside line actually here, because that's the grippier side for pole position. Anyway, we can think about that later on. Here is the Triple F Racing McLaren 650S, still with Hiroshi Hamaguchi at the wheel.
And GT3 Racing, with the variety that we see across the world in this class, Johnny, it really is a kind of motorsport top trumps, isn't it? It's all your favourite supercars in one place, going as quickly as they're able. Something like 600 horsepower from these cars, high levels of downforce, and in GT3 spec, fair amount of driver assistance. There is traction control, there is ABS braking in these cars, huge downforce, as you'll see from the various protuberances front and rear of these cars. Classic Porsche shape though there for the very latest 911 GT3R.
And if anybody does come down the pit road, then clearly pit lane speed limits are being closely watched.
Yep, Spielberg 5.0 there.
Indeed, yes. Oh, and that's interesting. Hiroshi Hamaguchi allowing now Perfetti through, so not sure what the thinking is there, although it is important through the first portion of this lap to get a slipstream. He's allowing the Porsche to extend its legs a bit too much, I would argue. Perfetti then coming out of the final corner over the grid hatchings and doing a little bit of weaving to make sure that those Michelin tyres are up to optimum performance temperature. Climbing the hill, a steep climb to turn one, hard onto the brakes, difficult to pick your apex and through, and that's a clean exit for Egidio Perfetti.
There is a car ahead of this little train though. All 10 cars out on circuit, no one is hanging around and waiting the start of this session. Now, will the car in front, and that is the classic and modern Ferrari 458, see these cars on their quick lap coming and let them by? The first car to cross the line should be this, the number 88 Porsche. Egidio Perfetti, I was very impressed with it, Imola, right up until the first corner.
Yes, when he went for an audacious manoeuvre around the outside of, it was a Ferrari, wasn't it?
It was the BMS Scuderia Italia car, which came back through the field.
Isn't here this weekend, sadly, but yes, the front two cars making contact. It's called at turn 2, but it's effectively the first corner of the Imola circuit, and sadly, yeah, the Ferrari went off into the gravel. The Porsche just about got through, but with big damage, and that was not the way we wanted to start this inaugural season of the Michelin GT3 Le Mans Cup. But they had a great performance at the Road to Le Mans event, and hopefully, as I say, season has properly started now. We're into the swing of things with, well, at the end of this race later on today, it'll be a half distance with still rounds at Paul Ricard Spa and Estoril in Portugal to come. Egidio Perfetti then works his way out of the final turn to post the first lap of the session, first lap in anger, and it's a 1:33.831 of this super pole. And that means he's 3/4 of a second quicker than Philip Hansen behind Hiroshi Hamaguchi, though, and Philip Hansen separated by 1,000th of a second on that lap.
And Hansen was actually all over the back of the McLaren and looking quicker than that car at the time. Times at the moment nowhere close to what we saw in the first session here, so there's time to come yet. It's getting cooler out there though, isn't it, Johnny? As we came across from the media centre, it was much cooler than when we arrived at silly o'clock this morning.
Yeah, interesting evening here at the track yesterday, in that there was a lot of cloud cover that actually kept the heat in, I found, and it was far warmer outside than in our air-conditioned commentary booth. So it was a pleasant evening. We don't quite have the heat in the day, and therefore the track temperature today may well change later on, but there is the threat of the odd shower away from this session for a couple of races that we have on the bill, and of course the races for the race for these cars later on today as well. So 10.5 minutes to go, and Alexei Basov, that man again, is now quickest, 1:31.799, still nowhere close to the 1:29 he managed in the first half of qualifying, but he's set down a marker in the number 72 SMP Racing Ferrari.
Philip Hansen is impressing me this weekend. He was a young man that was clearly finding his way with this Audi in round 1, but looked very much more the package this time around. Into the 1:31s for him. Hamaguchi though goes through at a 1:30.497 to go ahead of Alexei Basov, as does Egidio Perfetti. So it's 1:30.4 for the McLaren, it's 1:31.3 for the Porsche. What though can Alexei Basov do? He's gone quickest of all in the first sector. Thomas Fleur goes through second. We wait for Basov to come through.
Got a chance to see the 488 alongside a 458 Italia there as the number 14 car was overtaken. So it's 1:30.497 that needs to be beaten. That's the time from Hamaguchi in the 55 McLaren. Over the line goes Basov and does not. He does improve, but stays second, 0.2 of a second slower than Hamaguchi's time.
Time still to come, and 11 minutes and 40. Well, that's not 11 minutes, it's 9 minutes, sorry, still to go. Hamaguchi, though, purple sectors 1 and 2 this time. He's looking to improve. He kept something in the bag in the McLaren and is now beginning to get onto the rear of Perfetti's Porsche. Has he played this perfectly? Is he getting the toe?
Nice bit of alliteration there, Graham. Playing it perfectly and into the final corner. The 55, the Porsche was a bit sideways there on the curbs, so Perfetti's time might be compromised. Now he goes second and Hamaguchi improves yet further, a 1:30.247, so that's the fastest lap of anybody, with absolute bests through sectors 1 and 2, but Perfetti got the best lap of all through sector 3, so they're really trading times here, and that means Alexei Basov is now down to third fastest. He says he's got a bit more to give. Well, maybe all three of these cars have. Thomas Fleur is fourth in the number 51 Ferrari, and then it's Philip Hansen in the Audi.
Hamaguchi quickest of all again in sector 1 though, and this doesn't quite look to be enough this time around from the number 72 car. Sector time's just a tenth or two off in sectors 1 and 2. Unless he's had a storming run through sector 3, I don't think we're going to see him move up the board. And he makes a liar of me by doing a storming sector 3 and going through at a 1:29.9. That's what this Ferrari's got to reserve.
Absolutely, yes. We didn't see much of that lap, to be honest. Just caught him over the brow into turn 8, but a 1:29.9 brings him closer to what he posted in the first part of qualifying. Still on the absolute limit coming through turn 1 as well on the exit, and the Ferrari looking very tail happy. Interestingly, these two cars, the 88 Porsche and the 55 McLaren, have been pinged for track limits because they've both had lap 5 of this session deleted because of running over. That's this lap.
It's this
right,
lap.
Okay, so yeah, at the start of this lap, I think probably the McLaren maybe went off in sympathy with the Porsche. It's easy to do that as you follow someone close behind. You kind of follow their lines as well. And they were pushing hard out of turn 1, went over the line a bit too much. Has that message got to them? Yes, it did.
It did get to them because they both lifted off at the final sector. Because Hamaguchi was on track to beat the time of the 488 there by quite a margin.
But of course, he will have done it illegally, so needs to stay within the confines of the white line.
But the car that is going to beat that time from the number 72 is the 72, because if he gets a clear run through his third sector, to continue to watch this pair battling away, there's going to be another substantial improvement here. 1:29.902 was the time for Basov. 1:29.356 is the new time, and now 9/10 of a second quicker than the black McLaren.
Yeah, so 29.3, way quicker than the earlier session, and that is nearly a full second faster than Hamaguchi.
Nicolas Mislan, meanwhile, up to fourth quickest in the Ferrari 458, the classic and modern racing car. Sally Yoluk now goes ahead of him and Perfetti into third in the TF Sports Aston Martin. It's a good time for the number 26 car. Nicolas Mislan has raced in the European Le Mans Series in previous years, a variety of machinery. But great to have him back on the card, as it were.
Ivor Dunbar has his 5th lap deleted, again due to track limits. Our screen not telling us where those track... Oh, bit of a wiggly moment there for Nicolas Mislan.
Oh, way off.
He's gone over the curve. The car sort of lost grip about, well, mid-corner. So the Michelins initially gripped and then gave him no more, and he did well, actually, to arrest that slide. Seen some big moments through turn 8 in previous years, but through no fault of his own there, he had to run off a little bit over the yellow curve. Still on it, though, is Mislan, realising he's only got 5 minutes now to improve upon his time. It's strange that the car stuck for the first half of the... Here's a replay of it. You know, we've already had the squirrely moment, actually, and that was just running wide as a result
effectively
of it.
Recovering it from that. And the man at the moment that looks just potential to improve here, as does Sally Yoluk, now up into third position in the championship leading car. the Aston Martin, the number 34 car, and looks like he's going to improve this time around too. 4.5 minutes remain. He goes up to second in the Aston Martin and is just under 8/10 back from Basov. It looks to me at the moment, Johnny, as if no one's got an answer to the pace of this number 72 SMP Racing Ferrari.
Heads through turn 2 and now across the top of this circuit. The footprint of this circuit not vast, but it does offer you all sorts of different corners, and depending on where you sit in the grandstand, you can have a view of an awful lot of this circuit as it is displayed immediately in front of you on the side of a valley effectively, and the climb from turn 1 up to turn 2 is huge. Massive elevation change here at this circuit. That automatically means it's one of my favourites, just because elevation change adds character and also gives you good racing, I feel.
And what a beautiful setting as well.
Oh, fabulous.
The stereo and countryside around here is absolutely gorgeous place to come for any reason, but to come and watch motorsports, it's a real buzz. A lovely, lovely setting for a racetrack. Improvement, meanwhile, from Hamaguchi in the McLaren, now up to third again. Just a 10th off Sally Yullock, who's improving again this time around. Basov goes through, doesn't beat his own time, but is again in the mid-129s. That's way quicker than anybody else has actually managed. Now, can Sally Yullock, and here we see the Aston Martin, get under that 130 mark? He's as close as anybody is.
On the limit of the tyres as well.
Was that limits?
All 4 off certainly, but some of those wheels were on the curb. It depends whether it's judged by the white line or whether it's judged by straying off the red and white curbing, but yes, he was pushing it certainly, and the Michelin tyres were squealing, crying enough, but Yolok didn't improve.
Hamaguchi gets another lap time disallowed for that same reason. So car 55, he gets a warning rather than deletion of that lap to Sally Yolok. So as lap time stands, it wasn't an improvement.
2.5 minutes to go.
Hamaguchi, meanwhile, has gone through in a 1:29.907. That lap time stands.
Yes.
So he's the second man under 130. Perfetti improves as well to 130.0. So Hamaguchi now 0.5 seconds back from the charging Alexei Basov.
Improvement from Thomas Fleur as well puts him 5th now. 130.7 is Thomas's time, and Ivor Dunbar continuing to find pace as well, quicker on this lap. He's done a 133.8.5 rather, but could be set to improve yet further with some good times. But we've only got 90 seconds to go. Giuliano Perfetti will get this lap completed and maybe squeeze one more out of the session. What's he looking like on the split time? A touch slower, nearly 4/10 of a second slower through sector 2, and the 88 Porsche currently will start from the second row alongside Sally Yolok, who a moment ago was second. He's now 4th fastest, with Hamaguchi and Perfetti improving.
Pushing hard, Giuliano Perfetti, very hard indeed. Stays within the track limits. That will serve him well in the race director's eyes.
Real compression through that final corner. The car's almost bottoming out, and they find their level. They have to settle before the power is applied out of the final corner and then to the timing line. There is the fastest car so far, and on provisional pole, Alexei Basov, a 129.356, the time to beat then, with only 36 seconds to go. So again, Alexei, well, could get an extra lap out of this race, but out of this session, but it looks like he's going to head for the pit lane. Yes, he is. So Alexei Basov not really showing spectacular time on that, his 9th lap of the session, and Basov feels like he's done enough. Half a second is the gap from Basov back to Hiroshi Hamaguchi in the McLaren.
Improvement from Nicolas Mislat, but that's only good enough now for 6th place. That's a mark of the increase in pace we've seen at the top.